Hello everyone and welcome to Power Nickel's live event. Today the team will be going over a brief presentation followed by a Q&A session. So we do encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation in the bottom right corner in that chat box. No need to wait to the Q&A session to start submitting the questions, so please start firing them away as you have them. This event is being recorded, so you can watch it afterwards on YouTube as well. And without further ado, I'll kick things over to Terry to start things off.
Hey, thanks, Kyle, and Happy New Year to everyone out there. Just want to introduce you to the team that's on the call today that will be walking you through our exploration plans for 2024. So I've got Ken Williamson, who's our VP of Exploration. Ken will take us through some of the exciting prospects and projects that we've got planned for 2024. We think it's going to be a spectacular year. And I've got Duncan Roy, who is our VP of Investor Relations. So, and then obviously myself. And we look forward to sort of, quickly bringing you up to the exploration story, and then I'll pass over to Ken. So just to recap a little bit before we start, obviously we're positioning our whole approach this year as the best nickel investment on the planet, which is indeed a bold claim. Let's get into why we make such a bold claim. Ken, if you could advance the next slide.
Absolutely.
We're not going to tell you anything we don't believe is true, but it's always good to do your own due diligence. Next one. So just to refresh again, most people will know this, but there's going to be some new people on the call today. So we're in Quebec. We're just south and east of James Bay, outside of a small town called Nemaska. And Quebec's arguably the best jurisdiction in the world to be looking for critical minerals. Three big reasons for that. Number one, infrastructure is phenomenal there. So we're literally located off of Route North, which is a major highway. In our section, it's about 3 lanes, and you can literally drive off the highway right to our site. Across the road from us is a Hydro-Quebec substation. So obviously we got power. And then we're just 8 kilometers outside the town of Nemaska, which has got a regional airport and obviously hotels and restaurants and that sort of thing. So you got, basically infrastructure to support mining. The other thing it has is it's the seat of the James Bay Cree, so the Cree government. And the other thing Quebec has done really good is they've done a really amazing job of, educating and working with the First Nations to see mining as a productive, positive influence in their communities. And as such, the James Bay Cree have, they've got 4 within about 100 kilometers of our project. There's about, 2 mines being built to, permitted to be built. So very supportive community environment, and that's fantastic. And then the third reason why we love Quebec is it's also got the best fiscal terms for exploration and development anywhere in the world. So, we just recently closed a round at 50 cents a share, and the stock was 23. Well, that was possible because of the fiscal incentives that Quebec and Canada offer. So it enables you to get the 2-for-1 exploration, really. And there's also that's also available on development. So if this thing costs us $350 or $400 million to build, we could look to be getting half of that basically from the governments. So that makes it a lot more easy to build the mine, obviously, and to move things forward in a quick, concise way. So that's why we love Quebec. Next slide, Doug. This is sort of the cornerstone thing when we're saying, we're the best nickel investment on the planet. We mean from a sort of a asymmetric risk perspective, and the downside you have versus the upside. And we compare ourselves nickel-wise. You'll notice that we're talking about other high-grade nickel sulfide projects around the world. We're not talking about Canada Nickel or Giga Metals or these lower grade sulfide projects, which are big and have their own interesting investment potential, but their returns are in the low 15 to 20% IRRs, where ours would be a lot higher than that. Well, we will soon find out, but we're probably approaching 100% as our guess. So these types of projects, the high grade nickel sulfides, are the most rare in the nickel environment. And these are the other projects that we'd expect the market sort of would perceive mines would be developed at over the next few years. And when you look at that, you'll see that we're quite a bit cheaper than anybody else. And, there's reason to expect that that's going to change in the near term. And that's why we sort of say, hey, when you look at in terms of the pounds of nickel in the ground per unit of market cap, we're by far the cheapest, probably by, I don't know, a tenth or, a 20, 80% discount is something like that. It's crazy. Next slide, please. The other thing that we've done well at Power Nickel is it's not just on the exploration side. We're thinking about the development and how do we maximize, our development potential. Well, one of the ways you can do that, traditionally, nickel miners have made a concentrate and sold it to a smelter. That's one way forward, and we certainly have outlined how that could be possible for us in our most recent 43-101, where we went that approach. And we basically recovered about 70% of our nickel making a concentrate and about 50% of our other materials. We're working right now on a feasibility program with CVMR. CVMR is a large private a nickel refiner and miner. They have 18 plants around the world, and they're such high-profile partners as the U.S. Department of Defense. They've got 2 joint ventures with them. The U.S. $100 bill is made with a nickel plate that's made with CVMR technology. They're nanopowders. So they're a very high-profile company, more than $1 billion in sales. So they make a finished product. So their approach here is to get Class 1 nickel, which is what our mine would ultimately produce, and to turn it into finished products. So they would make powders, nanopowders, fine wire, anodes, precursors to the electric vehicle sector. So these products will generate 2.5 to 3 times revenue, so versus the concentrate. So that's a huge number. Imagine having triple your revenue versus not. So that's a big number for us. And the other thing it does is, and how they do it is, they recover a lot more metal. So they'll probably get 90% plus of the metals out. And we're going to see that soon in the first benchmark reports that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And then ultimately in the pilot studies and ultimately in the feasibility study, which will be, we think, at this point in early Q3. So that's going to be significant, and that will obviously enhance our value proposition for our shareholders. Next. So let's get back to the exploration, which was the primary purpose of today's call. So let's talk sort of where we're at right now. So we just posted this new 43-101 in December, sort of 7.2 million tons. The one thing you'll notice with this is basically it's heavily weighted towards indicated, like almost 2/3 is indicated and 1/3 inferred. In most cases, inaugural 43-101s are the absolute opposite to that. And the other point to note on this is that the inferred carries a higher grade, and we expect, as a result, especially of the CVMR influence of recovering more, that our grades are going to go up appreciably in the future. Next slide. So this is what the 43-101 resource looks like, and that's the 7.2 million tons. We'd expect that Nisk Main will grow, and we'll probably get to, we think around 10 million tons or north of that in Nisk Main. Next slide. So again, this gives you a bit more of a detailed view, and we've got the 6 blue boxes down below. Those are assays that will be coming out. They'll start to come out probably in the next couple of weeks. So we've got some assays that weren't included in our 43-101 last year, and they'll obviously add to the resource picture as we move forward. Next slide. It's a pretty amazing land package we've got. We got 45 square kilometers, or 46, I guess, and we've explored 1. We did step out late last year, about 5.5 kilometers away from our core deposit, and we saw it's an ultramafic deposit. We saw a ultramafic expression at surface, and we drilled it, and lo and behold, we hit this unexpectedly. We hit this amazing bonanza, almost 8 meters of 1 ounce PGMs. So super lucrative hole to hit. And it sort of changed our perspective a lot, in terms of what we're dealing with. And I can tell you, industry partners that have been in our data room have seen this hole, and it's like a holy smokes hole, because this is what happens in the very big nickel PGM deposits like Norilsk and Voisey's Bay. You get these, high grade PGM hits that are tossed up from below, deep in the surface where it's been cooking, and they land up top, and these pods appear, and they're quite lucrative to blend into a mine. So it also showed that this whole area was charged, in our view, and that meant that we had a pretty seriously big opportunity on our hands. So we sort of put our thinking caps on and said, well, what's the best way to exploit this opportunity in the quickest possible way? Next slide, please. So we brought in this technology that we had become familiar with because Talon Metals, which is one of our peer group companies that valued around 300 plus million, they use this, and it's basically called ambient noise tomography. And that little silver geode is sort of been pioneered by a company called Fleet Space Technologies. We've done a recent podcast with them. You can find that on our website. Pretty exciting stuff. They are Australia's fastest growing company right now. Rio Tinto has spent 24 million on this last year, and it's really amazing what it does. It's basically super sensitive seismic, and it gives tremendous insight to, especially when you add in, like they send a sound seismic blast down 2,000 meters into the earth, comes back as a sound map, and then they correlate that sound map data with other information, downhole EM, airborne EM, IP, gravity, all your drilling holes. And then they're able to get a really amazing lithographic sort of structural view of your deposit. And that provides, geologists and geophysicists like our team profound insights into how to best explore. And that's what it's done for us. Next slide, please. So it basically enabled us to sort of see that, there's a particular signature where we found that basically the ultramafic rock has a measurement of 4,300 meters per second. Everything in the earth has a measurement speed-wise, and that's the ultramafic. And what we noticed is that when it dropped off to 3,600 or 3,750, somewhere in that range, that's where the massive sulfides were deposited almost on a one-for-one basis. So that became a bit of a signature for us to say, hey, where else in our survey radius are we finding those types of results? And the next slide, please. And so we found 4 such spots, and they ranged inside, from 100% size like Nisk Main to as little as 50%, but totaling, a pretty significant potential sum. And this is sort of in the first 4 square kilometers we've done on our 46 square kilometer project. So pretty amazing stuff from surface. Next slide, please. So this is what the ambient noise tomography looks like. And at this point in the show, I'm going to turn it over to our ANT specialist and a man about town, Ken Williamson, who will walk us through this great technology and how it's revolutionizing exploration and helping us to understand NISC quicker and get to the promised land a lot faster with finding more resources. Ken, over to you.
Thank you very much, Thierry. Great opportunity. Thanks for that to explain to everyone where we're at with this. I guess the last news we presented about it, as you just mentioned, Thierry, we were very happy to announce and present what we think is the ANT signature leading to explaining, not really explaining, but to observing where those ultramafic rocks are, and that the goal was to define targets and stuff. The thing, though, is we've pushed that a lot further because the ANT data not only allows us to define what the ANT signature is to define where the targets are, but also is showing us the global architecture of the rock distribution on our property. And with such an information that was unavailable to us before, we've been able to push the interpretation on the geology side and on the structural geology side a lot further, such that the guesses we had before in terms of it seems that there's a fault there, probably the lens is displaced that way by that much, Well, it's no longer guesses now. It's kind of supported by data, and we can do much better educated guesses, scientific guesses actually to where actually those targets are located at. So in a nutshell, what we've discovered is those 4 areas, as you just mentioned, labeled ANT 1 through 4. And all of them basically are located within their own structural domain, which were defined based on interpreting faults. That was based on interpreting the ANT data. So it's all tied up together. And the general view here that we now have is not only we know about the potential lateral extension of the Nisk main deposit, both to the west or to the east, but following the ANT signature now on such a long view, we know what the impact on the interpreted faults might have been on the displacement of the nickel lens or nickel-rich lens. And as you can see, for instance, leading to ANT3, what we are interpreting now is the presence of a fault, as we had speculated before, but now it's pretty much demonstrated, and you can see how well it fits with both the geometry of the mineralized lens here, as well as the signature drop itself. So that signature becoming deeper on the west side of that fault, we've then centered ANT3 target area in a much deeper location than the previous drilling that was done very close to surface, so probably too far away at that point. So rinse and repeating that same process for all of those structural domains that were defined by interpreting them faults. We've went ahead and created the 3 others, the 3 other target areas, ANT 4, 2, and 1, the same way, using compartmenting those targets within their own structural domain and defining the depth using the ANT signature itself. So in a much detailed view, if we start with ANT1, that is a closer look, with about the potential size and actually what we see in terms of detailed information. In this location, there's nothing to see, hasn't been drilled before. So we're very, very excited about poking some holes in there, especially because ANT1, if I allow myself to go back a slide here, what we'll see is ANT1 is slightly different from the 3 others, both in terms of orientation. In here, we see it's slightly more northeast than east-northeast striking. And at the same time, if we recall the position of Wildcat area, then ANT1 could be a direct connection with the Wildcat PGM target that Terry just presented a few minutes ago. So that entire corridor will start with ANT1, but that entire corridor leading to the northeast towards Wildcat is very prospective as well. So going back to Wildcat link-ish ANT1 target, nothing to speak more about. Conclusion, we got to drill this, so we'll set ourselves up for that. Just south of ANT1, as illustrated here on the schematic long view, is ANT2. That is more related to an offset of the Nisk main. And in this location, I've highlighted again presence of a structural corridor here that seems to force the entire geology to sink down when we go to the east. So that's where ANT2 has been designed. In this particular location, what we can see is we have some drilling in this area, but once again, as I had explained for Ant 3 to the west, it seems that those holes never got deep enough actually to reach the core of what that target area is. Ant 3 we've discussed about, but same image showing the historical information up top. So same story, probably never got deep enough. So what we intend doing very early or very soon is to set up a hole that would test that target area, probably in its northeastern corner here to start with. And finally, Ant 4, again, cut into its own structural domain, slightly thinner in terms of lateral dimension, but again, very strong evidences or suggestions when we look at the signature profile here, that there's a drop even west of Ant 4, so that may lead eventually to an Ant 5 target area. But as we were getting very, very close to the limit of the Ant survey, where the confidence level becomes relatively low as compared to the center core of the survey, I didn't create that target as of yet. We'll see with upcoming data that we intend gathering what we can do, even further away from that Ant survey data. So that's pretty much it on that, unless Terry, did I forget something?
No, I think you covered it, so I mean, basically from a timing perspective, right now the rigs are getting geared up. I think we're going to be starting to turn tomorrow. Our first hole this winter is going to be we were halfway through it on our NIST main, and we'll finish that up. And I guess it's number 42. I don't know if it's on that, but yeah, that one there. So we'll finish that, and then after that, we're going to Ant 3, and as Ken suggested, going into that northeast area in that corner, and we'll be testing that. And our philosophy on the rigs is that we've got a second rig coming, and that second rig will actually be going to Wildcat to follow up on our highly successful PGM holes. And so what will happen on Ant 3, if Ant 3 is successful, i.e. we tested and we hit a massive sulfide intersection that we like, then we'll continue to focus on development drilling on Ant 3, follow up on it, and we'll bring in capital obviously aside, we'll bring in another rig, a third rig, to follow up probably on Ant 2 or Ant 1, I think, and the same process there. Once we successfully intersect the massive sulfide, we'll leave that rig continuing to drill appropriate step out holes. Again, just to give you context, on NIST main we drilled almost 30,000 meters in total, I think. So these will probably take Ant 3 would probably take 20,000-30,000 meters to develop it into a full pod, fully exploited. So there's obviously a ton of exploration work that will be done over the fullness of time, but from a impact on the potential size of it, the more that we can sort of identify these new pods and that they're successful, obviously that will have a material impact on our growth potential. And people say, well, how big can NIST be? And I cite the it's an ultramafic discovery. So Lynn Lake was 22 million tons. Voisey Bay ultramafic plus 50. I would think we would for sure be between these guys and possibly towards the upper end. So and the neat thing about NISC is that this is pretty much a surface to, like, I guess 600 meters or so, 500 meters depth. Generally speaking, that is not how nickel is found. Generally speaking, nickel is found much deeper, like Raglan, which is another very great mine in Quebec, at Norilsk, Voisey's Bay. They're already more 500 meters to 2 kilometers because nickel's heavy and it tends to sink. So we're quite excited, because we obviously see we got a great deposit in NISC Main, and it's growing. Looks like there's other very attractive exploration pods to be found. We know that in the history of time, every single nickel sulfide mine ever produced has always been more than one ore body. It's always been multiple pods, so it's highly likely that's what we have here. So that looks very prospective that we can add these on. But the other cool thing is that, and why we again talk about it being such a amazing asymmetric investment opportunity, is that you're not paying for that right now. You're getting this thing for 10 or 20 cents on the dollar, and then we've got all this exploration upside on the surface to 500 meters. Plus, when Fleet comes back next summer, we're going to be doing some deeper discovery. And Norilsk is the world's only $1 trillion deposit for minerals. It started off as a surface mine, and then they found, a couple kilometers away, the really big stuff. So that's sort of, who knows how big this can be. But yeah, as an investor, what's exciting is that's all free. You're getting it all for free. And so that's why we think it's such an amazing exploration opportunity, is that, we see lots of great targets that we can go after now. And the team is, completely psyched about these opportunities based upon the scientific data we've got on our hand. And of course, we'll learn by drilling. And I'm sure there'll be some good surprises and some bad ones, because that's how it works. But we're pretty stoked about what we see, and we think it's got crazy potential. So that's let's just go to we'll wrap it up, Ken, with talking about the next steps. If you can move forward a few slides.
Yeah, sure. Just to comment on what you just said, Terry, is I'd like to remind people a bit too that when we look at the profile here on top of that screen looking north, and we focus at where is NISC Main versus that ant signature that we've kind of locked on, we got to realize that NISC Main location is the only place that ant signature kind of rises up, and it gets closer to surface. And I'm kind of wondering sometimes, is that part of the reason why NISC has been discovered in the first place, for that signature to come and rises closer to surface, easier to find, perhaps. I'm talking through my hat a bit, but if that is the case, then it would certainly explain in a way that ant 3, 4, 2, 1 are all very, very good target, but can't be seen from surface. It's too deep. So just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, fair enough.
So you wanted me to...
Yeah, so go to the nickel carbon-free thing. Yeah.
There
So
we go.
back one slide. Maybe it's ahead one slide. Yeah. So basically, just in terms of the NISC action plan, we basically got the benchmark studies from CVMR will be coming out in the next week to 10 days. I was talking with CVMR today, and they're working around the clock on it. And obviously, we started drilling. The drill rig will be turning tomorrow. We'll be testing what we talked about, a 3 and 2, I think, first. And obviously, that'll be exciting when we get that news out. There'll be in early Q2, we'll have a prototype report where CVMR will actually be taking fairly large amount of our ore, processing it in a replica plant that we would theoretically build here, and then seeing what the recoveries are. So we go from sort of like a benchtop model to an actual, prototype, and then that ultimately will allow us to produce the feasibility study in we think in Q3. We had hoped to have it out sooner, but we need more metallurgical rock to do that, and we have to drill to get it. So that's why that's delayed a little bit. But generally speaking, we're going to be having drill results starting, I think in the next, 10 days or so. And then I would think every 2 weeks from, now until August, just on the current program. And then ultimately, we will probably, update our just announced 43101 and make it into a PEA in Q4. So a lot of amazing exploration news going to be coming from NISC. Hard news. I was going through with one of the investment banks today that we think we're going to have probably 20 press releases between here and the end of June, and none of them fluff pieces. They're all sort of meaningful, like you can see. So exciting stuff. So maybe now would be a good time to take some questions and answer any questions that might be out there in the audiences, and happy to do that. Kyle, if you've got some, now would be a good time.
Okay, great. Yes, there is a lot of questions, and keep them coming. So we'll start from the top. Are you able to re-entry to go deeper on drill holes to save on drilling?
May I answer that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the questions referred to can we actually drill a mother hole and then wedge off of it to save on the top portion of the mother hole, and then constantly drilling more and more targets. We are starting to do that now with that old 42. We're drilling actually 42B, and it's going to be a wedge starting off probably at mid-distance around in that mother hole, 42 being the mother hole. And then from that midpoint, we'll be wedging higher to pierce the target location few tens of meters above the actual intercept. And starting now, we will be using probably more and more of that strategy, especially as the targets are becoming deeper and deeper. We will try to make good use of that money for sure.
Thank you, Ken. Adrian's wondering, once the ANT data has been collected on an area, might it need to be redone at a different depth at some point, or is it a one and done type of technology?
From my understanding, the depth is based upon the number of geodes you have and the spacing of the geodes. So we had a allocation. I think it was I can't remember. I think it was like 100 or so. Now and Fleet is they're. I mean, this is a relatively new company, several years old now, and they're rapidly growing, and they're learning their technology as how to make it better. So last year the common deployment was 100. This year it's almost double that, and so to get them denser so we can go deeper. So this year I would say we probably got to 400 or 500 meters. And next summer we hope to get to almost double that. With the density. So there is some new approaches and by putting them together closer, and some better technology always being upgraded from there and their software, so that they hope to be able to get us deeper looks.
And if I may, Terry, I don't know if the question was very, very technical or not, but if it is very technical, what I can say is the different ANT surveys can be combined one into each other. So if you do a very high-res, small-scale survey, and then you decide to do a property scale one, obviously the resolution on property scale will be a lot less than the detailed survey. But at the end of the day, what Fleet guys and girls do is they do combine all of it together, so you get better resolution within the regional lower resolution model in the areas where you would have done detailed surveys there. And that's pretty much what we're looking at doing later this year.
Great. Thank you, guys. Jack's wondering about the expected turnaround times for the recent drilling and the assay results.
Yeah, we expect we'll get something out in the next 10 days to 2 weeks on some of the fall targets.
Great. Straight to the point. Thank you. I noticed there are legacy holes in the ANT3 and ANT2 areas. Are there any potential to re-enter? Oh, seems like a similar question as the other one about re-entering the holes and drilling down.
Yeah, similar question, but in the answer for that specific one though is no. The previous drill holes were drilled and did pass through the target area, but they were overshooting the target, like drilling too close to surface rather than deeper. So even if we were to extend those previous holes, it would not gain nothing. It requires a deeper setup.
This might add on nicely to this question. Regarding drilling, are there any advantage to using technology from shale oil drilling where one hole could be kicked out in different directions from the bottom?
Again, that is related to wedging. And specifically in this case, what we're referring to is Devico directional drilling. I'm used to do that a lot when the drilling is really deep, and it has lots of advantages. It's very, very precise drilling where you actually define the pierce points and you let the technicians and specialists to actually steer the hole to actually get to those pierce points. But that technology is about 2 to 2.5 times as much as expensive as regular drilling is with simple wedging. So maybe eventually we'll consider Devico, depending at what the depth is, what the geometry of them zones are, and blah, blah, blah. But it would have to worth the money invested. So right now we can do as good of a job without spending that much money. So
CP Folk has an interesting question here. How does the lithological dipping of Nisk deposit and host rocks affect the quality and interpretation of the ant surveys?
That's a really, really good question. Actually, it has lots of impacts in the sense that the geodes, the receivers of the data, are located on surface. So ideally, if we'd have, subvertical or sub-horizontal surfaces or volumes to deal with, it would make the interpolation or interpretation of that data by the fleet geophysicist a lot easier. Having to deal with oblique contacts creates some sort of a blurriness, and that's why we were actually, I should have mentioned that earlier, but that's why we're referring to a range of velocities, not a specific velocity attached to one particular rock type. But because it's dipping and the data is kind of coming through all of this at the same time, it blurs the image. And so we end up with a lower level of confidence. So the contact becomes a range of velocity. And that range of velocity is what we've highlighted being that ant signature that we're kind of following. So within that range is where we expect, the core of the deposit to be. But where exactly in that range, we got to drill to know that. It's a little bit the same principle as an airborne mag survey, where you would see shadows along the mag highs, per se. That would be an indication on the dip of them structures where it's if people are used with geophysics analysis, then it's a little bit the same approach here. So.
Thank you for that, Ken. I think I'll direct this next question to Terry here. Just wondering about getting some commentary on some strategic investments in the nickel market, specifically Canada Nickel's deal with Agnico Eagle and Samsung. Now add on FPX's recent one with, I don't remember the name exactly,
Sumitomo Mills.
Commenting you have a great partner with CVMR, but do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, obviously, congratulations to both CNC and FTX. Great, accomplishments for those companies. And I think, it shows that despite honestly, a declining nickel price at the moment, and because of the Indonesian oversupply at the moment. It shows you how ultimately scarce nickel is in the world, and especially North American nickel and nickel that can be class 1 nickel that would be eligible for batteries and for high tech use really. So despite these projects being not crazy lucrative in terms of IRRs, internal rates of returns based upon their feasibility studies, they're getting investors because they actually can produce nickel in big numbers, and that's attractive for these folks like Samsung and Sumitomo, and for them, I think for Samsung, it's definitely they have a need, I believe, for 200,000 tons of nickel per year from North American sources. So they got a big supply crunch because of the IRA. They gotta find it somewhere. So I think that's why they stepped up. They're trying to solve that in some way, shape, or form. And I think the interesting, in many ways, I understand why they're doing it. They've got these batteries they're committing to delivering. They need nickel, and it has to be sourced locally to be competitive. So they got to find choices. So you can see them stepping up and saying, "Hey, we'll be part of this process with Canada Nickel." What's more interesting is what about Agnico? Agnico is a gold company. You know what I mean? But they're a mining company, obviously, and a very bright bunch of guys over there. I always liked Agnico, so they look at this and sort of said, "Hey, this is a great time to be buying at the bottom of the cycle. That the long-term future for nickel looks bright. I mean, nickel. There's two primary driving forces to nickel. The first and the biggest is stainless steel. So stainless steel is basically urbanization. If you're buying pots and pans and fridges and stoves and washers and dryers, you're buying stainless steel, and stainless steel is made of a lot of nickel. So that is like 60-70% of the nickel is stainless steel. So that's the number one driver. And stainless steel growth has been 6% compound annual growth rate over the last many number of years. I mean, I think under COVID in China, probably there was some reduction. I haven't seen the last year's number, but I suspect that's what's provided a bit of the glut right now. And then the other big driver in the nickel demand is electrification. So the batteries, generally speaking, not just car batteries, but all the other batteries. But the car batteries are almost, you can look and sort of say, well, how many cars, EVs are out on the road today? How many will be out next year, and so forth? And then if you roll that forward just a few years, based upon all the government incentives and government mandates, really, there's no question there's going to be a lot more EVs on the road. Well, they're going to need a lot of nickel for those EVs. There's not going to be people say, hey, well, what about lithium ion batteries, and there's not going to be one winner in the battery world. That basically there's going to be multiple winners. There's going to be more need for all of this stuff. If you're traveling any sort of distance, which is basically the North American situation, and some other places in the world, or you have weather conditions like cold or wet, you need nickel. So there's going to be, multiple demands, and based upon, what we've seen with people like Benchmark and Wood Mackenzie, these forecasters, and even BHP saying we're going to need, 2 times the amount of nickel. So I don't know. There's going to be a lot of nickel demand, and so what we're seeing here, on the investment side, is smart companies, taking advantage of the market, knowing that they have to, get positioned and making investments. So I think the second part of the question was, what is Power Nickel doing in that respect? And so we're very much exploring that. We've got I think 8 or 9 companies now in our data room. We said we weren't going to negotiate anything until we had our 43101 posted and out, and we announced it. We'll be putting it out, the full document, possibly later this week or early next week. It's imminent. It's in it. BC Securities for final review right now, and then we're going to do a process. We said in our press release at the outset of the year for 2024 planning purposes, expect us to do a deal in H1 where we have 10% stake and and possibly some offtake with it, and we believe that will generate $20 to $40 million for the company, which would be obviously a big move from where we're at today. But we just think that this is what industry will pay for this project because of its bones. And industry isn't, they're competing against themselves. There's going to be 15 or 20 people that want this piece, and only one of them is going to get it. So that's a definition of being in a good position. So that's what we're planning to do over the next several months, and that'll, I think, be a big. Obviously, when that happens, that'll be a big day for us.
Great, thank you for that response. Quite thorough. We have one more question here. Well, I know you guys have been back-to-back meetings all day, so I think we have enough time for one more question here, and it's going to circle back. CP Folk had a follow-up question there, Ken, in regards to the ant surveys there. He was just wondering, do you see strong velocity changes in the identified fault zones?
Well, actually, yes. Actually, the fault zone interpretation comes actually from breaks that we see in the velocity response. So we can still see the screen, I guess. So if we look at the bottom image here, them faults, their location here seems to be off, but what we need to have a look at is in 3D, when we spin things around, we will see along them different dashed lines here, many surfaces and breaks that are lining up. And that is very, very strongly suggesting presence of a break, aka a fault. And once we identify that, what I do after is I reload all of the other data sets, mag data, structural measurements from surface, blah, 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 to make sure that there were, if possible, to know that there were indication of a fault there. So the ant data basically helps us to define where the faults are, and primarily defining their dip, because we can follow those breaks in 3D, and that's a really good indication of the dip on them structure. Mind you, the mag data is showing also the same breaks on surface, so it's a combination of everything here.
So Kyle, just before we go, I was just reading one of the other questions, and one of them had a question about, saying, the EV market is over, and I think that's a fair question, and I think there's, obviously we're seeing a lot of, the lithium stocks are down. Generally, the nickel stocks are down. I think we're up slightly year over year, but overall, the sector has been down, and so is that sort of a problem? And there's a couple of answers to that question. One is nickel mines have been around for a very long time, and they've been looking for nickel for a very long time because nickel is needed. Stainless steel is a huge product, and there's many other purposes for nickel, but that's like the easiest one to understand. And it's been growing at, as I said, 6% compound annual growth rate. And so this nickel deposit here would be profitable, just as a supplier of stainless. But that's not what we're going to do. But I'm just saying certain deposits, because of the grade, are profitable. If you have a 0.2% nickel, like like the F&P and Canada Nickel, those ones need more more things to stay. They need a rebound in the nickel market. They need more government support because of the huge capital costs, because they ultimately can produce a lot of nickel. And if you're Samsung, as I said, who needs 200,000 tons of nickel per year, that may very much solve your problem, even though it's not like a tremendous economic return. And for Samsung, from the economics of the nickel, what it makes on its batteries is what its business is, and that may be a tremendous thing for Canada Nickel shareholders because they get to produce this and sell it. So that's that. But it is reliant on the nickel EV market, at least to get financed and off and running. Whereas one of the benefits, from a risk perspective about a project like NIS, because it's high grade, we're not reliant on the nickel EV market. We don't think it's disappearing anytime soon. Do I think people said, the EV market, the forecasters were saying, well, would be 50% of the nickel market, and today it's 10%. I don't think it's going to be 50%. I just don't think we can find that many nickel mines. But I think it could be 25%, and that would be massively positive for nickel. I think that would be ridiculous for us. But the other cool thing about working with somebody like CVMR is I think their biggest product right now is powders. So they make nickel powders, which you can't use in batteries, but you can also use them in 3D printers. They use them in aerospace. Their biggest client is the U.S. Department of Defense. So there's some very high-end products that can and will be made with a Class 1 nickel. They came to us not necessarily for the car market, but for their other clients. They also obviously sell the car market as well. But so there's a lot of applications for that. So I think it's never as good or as bad as it seems. So it wasn't as the whole EVs to the stratosphere thing was not true, and no, EV is not going to die either. There's going to be electric vehicles, and there's going to be a lot more of them in the future. Now, will there be 100% electric vehicles? I don't believe so. Never have. But I believe there'll be a significant growth there, and that'll be something we can take advantage of. But I think there's many growing, interesting high-tech purposes for nickel, especially Class 1 nickel. And I think we've got the partner that can probably deliver that. So that's pretty cool. So that's my comment on that, because I think it's a valid question. I think it's in people's minds, and it's important to address that. Last question from Ulrich, and then we have to jump because we got our next meeting. Ulrich asks about you seem to have done a good job in exploration on the business side, but what about the stock? So again, a fair question, and that's the one that I have, and we as a team have the least control over. The stock market is sort of its own beast. We believe. Somebody once told me when I first got in the business world, they said, in the short run, there can be good companies and bad stocks, and bad companies and good stocks. But in the long run, there's only good companies and good stocks, and bad companies and bad stocks. So our intent is to be a good company and a good stock. We think we're going to be a great stock. We're thinking we're doing all the right things, and eventually we're going to get a reward. And we think it's imminent. If you look at our chart, it's sort of 18 to 36. We're at sort of towards the bottom end. We got like a ton of great news coming. We got our 43-1 out. It came out at the end of the year, which is unfortunate, but it's, we're getting our story out there. Industry's picking it up. We're about to, do some deals with some bigger investment banks in terms of, research coverage and stuff like that. So I'm bullish. I was the biggest investor of my family in the last round. So one can only write with one's own checkbook. And I have been the biggest, my family and I have been the biggest investor in Power Nickel for the last 18 months. So do I believe I'm crazy and that I've made a bad investment? No, I think we've made a hell of an investment. It hasn't been realized yet, but it will be soon. And I think it's, I'm expecting this to be, honestly, if I don't make 10 times my money, I'll be super depressed. And I think it could be a lot better than that. But I mean, you got to be patient. If you have to wait an extra 6 months to make that multiple X, is that a bad thing? I don't think so. But when this thing goes, you're going to say, damn, I should have bought. I know that's going to happen. Many of you are out there listening. Some of you will not. And you'll be saying, I know I should have bought that one. That's what I think is going to happen, but we'll see. So I think that's about it. Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, we better give you some buffer between meetings here, but a good way to end it. Terry, thank you so much. Ken, Duncan, I know I've sat in on these events with you a few times, and I want to thank your audience too. Always engaged and always asking a lot of questions. Some curious minds in the audience, so it makes these events worthwhile. If you came in a little late, it is being recorded, so it will be available on YouTube afterwards. So don't fret if you came in a little late. But yeah, I guess I could pass it back to you to close it off. But thank you.
Yeah, okay. So we'll just close it off. I see one last question they asked. Is there any chance that we'll have a battery recycling plant on this site? And yeah, there is. In fact, CVMR's plan is at the moment to build one into the structure, because it would cost probably $15 or $20 million more to do so now, and then we'd be able to take in both lithium ion and regular NMC batteries and break them down and produce constituent parts, as opposed to building a whole new recycling facility, which would cost over $100 million. So it would enhance margins, allow us to be 100% carbon neutral, and we think it would be quite a lucrative business. So yeah, that's something we would think about doing. And then in terms of next things to watch for us from the communication side of things with shareholders is, after the benchmark studies come out from CVMR, which we expect will show a much higher recovery rate for our metals, we'll have a CVMR podcast. And I know CVMR is a bit of a mystery to many folks, because they're a private company and they're not as well known as, say, Glencore or Ivanhoe or something like that. But they're powerhouses in their own respect. And I think that'll be very interesting for you all to attend. And we look forward to chatting with you then. And until that point, be safe and have a great day.